Hello, and thank you for joining me as we take a little wander through the great escapes of the world. If you have a love of travel or of geography, of cultures, architecture, or just nature, I hope you'll enjoy this reading. I do apologize for my voice. Unfortunately, fighting a little bit of a cold, but we're just going to take a read through this lovely book and discuss and ramble as per usual about the sights, sounds, smells involved in travel. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoy. In the contents today, we'll be going through culture, city, chill out, wild, food and drink, party, family, romance, and even shoestring budget, which might resonate with a lot of us. Travel is so expensive, but if you're able to do it at all, it changes your perspective, it changes your life. The perfect getaway. What's so incredible to me is that the perfect getaway is different for everybody. I think for most people it might look like this, but for somebody else it could be the mountains, it could be the Arctic, it could be the Serengeti. I think what's important is that you approach it with an open mind and an open heart, with respect for nature and for people, for the weather, and even for yourself. And it's amazing how it'll open up your eyes and your heart. Let's start with culture. We'll be flipping around a bit today, but I hope you'll enjoy it. Chicago. Chicago's architecture. Al Capone, King of Chicago. Al Capone, history's most renowned mobster, may have been born in New York City, but it was after moving to Chicago that the young criminal made his mark, exploiting the Prohibition era of the 1920s to smuggle and bootleg alcohol, while also involved in other illegal ventures such as gambling and other things as well. He was able to lead the crime empire known as the Outfit to great success. In a strange turn of events, I think Capone was finally convicted on tax offense and very famously served time in Alcatraz prison. I'm sure there's much nicer things to think about when you go to Chicago, though. I know I'm always thinking about pizza, particularly in Chicago. For other people, it might be the Cubs at Wrigley Field or the architecture. There's something so fascinating about the architecture of Chicago as opposed to, say, New York City. New York City has these stepped back sections, almost like this building here, where as you go towards the top level, it gets narrower and narrower because of laws regarding light and air filter down to the city. Now, in the city of Chicago, they didn't have that rule. There were no bylaws or zoning restrictions that mandated that the buildings had to be stepped back every couple of stories. So you have these beautiful, clean, simple lines going all the way up the buildings. And although you might think one metropolis is like the other, it gives such an air of distinct Chicago-ness to this particular skyline. The panorama from Chicago's Millennium Park is of a world-class architecture. Start with Frank Gehry's J. Pritzker Pavilion, with its twisting chrome segments rippling across the lawn, then turn to the right to be greeted by a glittering pane of blades, Renzo Piano's modern wing of the Art Institute. Turn a little further, and Adler and Sullivan's 1889 auditorium building on South Michigan Avenue is visible in the distance, as Anish Kapoor's chrome sculpture Cloud Gate hovers like an alien blimp waiting to show you around the city that gave birth to the skyscraper, Chicago blues, house music, the Cubs, and the Oprah Winfrey Show. Ah, yes, Cloud Gate. I think it's more affectionately known as the Bean. Cloud Gate is maybe a little bit more poetic, but trust the public to cut to the chase. Flamenco and tapas in Andalucia. The triangle of land in western Andalucia between the cities of Seville, Jerez de la Frontera, and Cadiz is one of the most culturally fertile regions in Spain, with multiple offerings to satisfy the ears, soul, and stomach. When wine, food, and music conspire, it can be a powerful experience. In Andalusia, you can experience all three on the same night, and in the same bar if you're lucky. Tapas were allegedly invented in Andalusia's taverns several hundred years ago, after patrons began putting small slices of food over their wine glasses to keep flies out. Sherry's origins are even older. The Phoenicians, Romans, and Moors cultivated vineyards in the Jerez region, although it was the British penchant for fortified wine in the 19th century that financed the trade. Flamenco is virtually synonymous with Andalusia, a fusion of Byzantium hymns, Spanish folk songs, Jewish chants, and the musical rhythms of Roma people. As with most homegrown inventions, nothing rivals experiencing them in the land of their genesis, particularly in the charismatic capital of Seville. Dance in general is so moving, but there is something about flamenco that you just feel in your blood, don't you think? Perhaps it's the castanets. Flamenco in Seville isn't just about dancing. There's also singing and guitar playing too. Now here we have a very different atmosphere. You can even see the color change. In Berlin. When Berlin became the capital of reunified Germany in 1999, the city was to be a corporate showcase of national prestige. But Berlin chose the arts over finance. Edgy, educated, and eclectic, it's now a cultural honeypot with many of the world's standout museums. I'm never really sure if Berlin knows its entire identity. You have such an interesting war and post-war heritage. The architecture is fascinating. The current culture is so edgy and, quite frankly, a little bit too cool for me. You always want to fit in when you're in Berlin. They always seem like they know something a little bit more than you do. What's your experience been in Germany? On one hand, it's beautiful museums holding artifacts that you are astounded by. And on the other hand, it's fashion and clubs that are entirely out of reach. Salsa magic in Santiago de Cuba. Now, if we're talking about music and dance that moves you, that you can feel in your blood, Cuban music, particularly Cuban jazz, has to be at the top, don't you think? The Cuban songs originated in the eastern part of Cuba and are a happy combination of forceful African rhythms and poetic Spanish melody. The ethnomusicologist Fernando Ortiz called it a love affair between African drum and Spanish guitar. I think some of the most famous trumpet players, or at least in my opinion, the most beautiful ones, have also been Cuban. The Cuban son is probably the forerunner of salsa, and is one of the most influential forms of music in Latin America. You'll find a Casa de la Trova in many large towns. It's the best place to hear it being played live. Broad smiles and tired feet spill out onto the street at the end of a day's class, but your musical adventures will continue. Wander the streets and live music is all around you, from the city's world-famous venue Casa della Trova to a host of smaller local bars giving you plenty of opportunity to finesse your moves. By the final night, while you certainly won't be the hottest dancer in town, you will be able to hold your own on a Cuban dance floor. You'll have a feel for the blend of Spanish canción and African rhythms that underpin Cuban son music. And you'll have an experience that has taken you to the very heart of Cuban life. So many beautiful places. An impression of Monet's Normandy. Inspirational. That's Normandy. Its cliffs, cathedrals, glittering seas, and gorgeous gardens have moved many a master to put brush to canvas. Spend a week here and there, and you can put yourself properly into their pictures. Now this might be quite recognizable if you're into Impressionist paintings at all. Impressionism hasn't always been popular. The term, coined in 1874 to describe a group of unconventional Parisian painters including Monet, Cézanne, Renoir, and Pissarro, was meant as an insult. Traditionalists just didn't get their style. Isn't that always the case? Which was to portray a general visual effect rather than the details. I'm not sure if it was a general visual effect they were going for, but more of a emotion, a feeling of a place, perhaps its soul beyond the details. Definitely a sense of motion, sense of lighting and atmosphere. What do you think? They use short, rapid, often visible brush strokes and bright, intermingling colors to convey the sense of a scene, rather than its absolute reality. They painted landscapes and urban tableaux, usually outdoors rather than in studios, to better capture changing light and spontaneity. The results? Fresh, free, and eventually beloved worldwide. Now, it's not just about art, it's also about the art of eating. The rich pastures of the region are renowned for the dairy produce. Milk and butter are ladled into dishes with abandon, while local cheeses include Whiffy Livero and the world-famous creamy Camembert. I'm not entirely sure if I'm saying that right, but it is delicious, whatever its pronunciation. Traditional drinks make the most of the orchard spoils. Expect pear and apple ciders and fruit brandies, which are most often drunk in small amounts between courses of a lengthy meal. Now that sounds delightful. In traveling, sometimes it's the sights, but most often it's the food and the people, being able to sit down and enjoy a lovely drink of something and converse with people. Sometimes you don't even speak the same language, but it still ends up being an absolutely wonderful experience, speaking and learning from others. You could waltz a weekend away in Vienna. The Viennese whirl. If Rio owns the samba, then Vienna owns the waltz. And as Rio marks carnival with a lot of parades, while Vienna celebrates, it does so with grand balls. Indeed, the city hosts around 450 of them, and that's quite a lot. I guess if anyone's ever had that fantasy of attending a ball, Vienna is where you need to be. These run from January to March. The season kicks off in sumptuous style with the Imperial Palace's Grand Ball and New Year's Eve. Anyone can buy a ticket, but you need a fancy outfit, tux or a ball gown, and you need to be able to dance. Take a lesson. Even if you've waltzed before, the Viennese variety is breathtakingly fast, and it offers many studios. that offer dance lessons. I think if you're going to be dancing the waltz in the birthplace of the waltz, there is a little bit of pressure to get it just right. Here, this book offers a 60-second guide to Mozart, but I'm not entirely sure you can encapsulate his entire influence on culture and on history in 60 seconds. Again, the Vienna Opera Ball is the highlight of the city's winter season and takes place in the State Opera House here. After your fill of music, head for the hills, quite literally. Vienna is the world's largest wine-growing city, with 7 square kilometers of vineyards nestled in its immediate vicinity. Living la dolce vita in Wales. Now there's an interesting thought. I feel like Wales is the often forgotten middle child, unfortunately, of the UK. But it does seem charming. I might be wrong, but I do believe Wales has the highest concentrations of castles per capita. Now, hiking Snowdonia is something that I know a lot of people have been dreaming of doing. In Snowdonia National Park, which you can see here. Mount Snowdon, Wales' biggest mountain. It would seem rude not to head up it, being so close. Ride the newly reopened West Highland Railway, a characterful narrow-gauge line, to remote Reedu Station. From there, a gentle trail leads up to the 1,085-meter summit. It's 12 kilometers there and back, and takes around 6 hours. Alternatively, if you're feeling more laid back, a little bit more Italian than hearty Welsh, make your way to Llanberis and take the Snowdon Mountain Railway all the way up to the top. What a breathtaking mountain range in Réunion. It's an active geological wonder that erupts with great regularity. When it's not exploding, it is possible to trek right up to the smoking crater. This 5-hour trek through lava fields and up to the volcano's loose rock sides demands a certain level of fitness. Good walking boots, a hat, sunscreen, and water. And no amount of geological luck, I imagine. I would double check and make sure it's not set to erupt before I do. It's never a casual stroll, but once you get to the summit and look down into the smoking crater and then across the luminescent Indian Ocean, all your aches will fade. I find that's often the case with hiking in general, or even travel in general. Sometimes you do feel the aches of jet lag, of hiking, of different food, water, culture. It's meant to make you out of place. But then look at the places you do discover. Feeling fado in Lisbon. The first time I ever heard fado in Lisbon is very hard to define. It was part heartache, part startling because of the emotion of it. Very, very sad, but also beautiful. If you ask what fado is, or ask the locals to explain it, you'll receive different answers every time. Even the fadistas, the fado singles themselves, struggle to define the music and songs. The queen of fado, Amália Rodrigues, famously proclaimed, "I don't sing fado, it sings me." And one of Portugal's current divas thinks along the same lines. "Fado is difficult to define," she said. It's something you need to feel. It's a kind of music where we use the melody and words to express what's going on in our soul. The easiest way of understanding the concept of fado and saudade, a melancholic longing, is to just listen to it. I think if you're ever fatigued by the constant 2.15 second churned out pop hits that sort of all sound the same because they're written by the same people and produced by the same people and have the same BPMs, an experience like this is like a factory reset. It's not something you listen to so much as something you experience. It's never the same way twice, and it's not so much about the music as it is about the soul. Essential experiences in Lisbon: getting lost in the village-like lanes of Alfama, searching for the soul of fado. Jump aboard a tram for a teeth-rattling roller coaster ride about Alfama. If you don't end up taking the tram, do be prepared to walk. The very steep 30 to 45 degree inclined streets are definitely something to experience. But the views are stunning. The city is spread across steep hillsides that overlook the Rio Teo. And then you have the miradoros, or the viewpoints. Stunning. One of my favorite places in Lisbon is if you go all the way down to the square and you can go to the edge of the water and see where the steps, the marble steps, descend directly into the water where the royal boats used to approach in the harbor. Dive into literary Dublin. When it was published in 1897, no one could have guessed that Dracula would make Bram Stoker the most influential horror fiction novelist ever. Born in Dublin in 1847, Stoker had been a sickly child with plenty of time for reading. As an adult, he became friends with Oscar Wilde and the actor Henry Irving. But it was possibly from his chance meeting with Hungarian historian and traveler Arminius Vambery that Stoker learned of the legend of Vlad the Impaler, aka Dracula. Vambery's reward? As rumor has it, he was immortalized in the novel as Abraham Van Helsing, Dracula's implacable foe. Now that's quite a good friend to have. If you are going to write a masterpiece, or if your friend is going to write one, it'd be quite amazing to be immortalized in such a character. Particularly if Hugh Jackman is going to play your character many, many years later. Now, of course, one of the most famous things in Trinity College, Dublin, is the Book of Kells, one of the oldest tomes in the world. Of course, you can see an Irish play at the National Theatre, ponder some of Oscar Wilde's moving works, and then probably finish up with a nice little pub crawl as well. Samuel Beckett, Bram Stoker, Oscar Wilde. I think they're all part of this beating literary heart that's in Dublin, Ireland. James Bond and Jamaica. The old-time glamour of Jamaica comes alive at Goldeneye, a resort where Bond creator Ian Fleming used to write his spy novels, looking out onto a jade-green sea. Now that is a stunning view. I've never seen colors like that. Emerald green, turquoise, sapphire, baby blue and white, green, brown, and these splashes of absolute crimson. We know about Bob Marley, but the food is also amazing. Jamaican food. Rice and peas and jerk pork and jerk chicken and everything. Here on the other end of the world you have Marrakesh. Essential experiences, the book says, are bargaining for glittering works of art in the ancient zoos of the old Medina, or whiling away hours over mint tea while lounging on cushions in an exquisitely tiled cafe. Steaming and enjoying a relaxing scented massage in an exotic feeling hammam. Dreaming away an afternoon in the gardens, or enjoy a sundowner or a candlelit dinner on a rooftop, listening to the calls to prayer echo across the city. Morocco, I think most people know famously from Casablanca, maybe the movie with Humphrey Bogart himself, but there's so much more to it than old black and white representations. Casablanca, Rabat, Fez, Marrakesh. I suppose some might think of it as the fez worn by maybe Doctor Who as well. There's so much culture and rich artwork to appreciate. If you're a lover of ceramics and tiles, I don't think you're going to find somewhere better. Moroccan food is fragrant and delicately spiced, and cooking in a riad kitchen is a fascinating way to learn something while enjoying your holiday. Cookery courses here are very hands-on and usually encompass a trip to the local market to select produce and spices. You can learn to create traditional delicacies such as couscous, tankines, Moroccan salads, pastries, and mint tea. Now that's quite lovely. I don't think you'll ever learn more about a culture than by experiencing its food, but not just eating it, but learning from people how to make it, the process, the time, the care, the culture. Dubbed Canada's Amazon, the Great Bear Rainforest encompasses a wild region of mountains, islands, and fjords along British Columbia's coast. One of the largest areas of intact temperate rainforest in the world. It covers an area of around 64,000 square kilometers, running from the Alaskan border down to near Campbell River on Vancouver Island. Home to grizzly bears, wolves, and spanning salmon, its most famous inhabitant is the emblematic spirit bear, which gives the forest its name. How sacred. Remote valleys are lined with forests of old Sitka spruce, Pacific silver fir, and various cedars that are up to 100 meters tall and 1,500 years old. There's something so humbling about being in a place like this, where you're just a mere blip on the timeline compared to these trees that have seen so much and weathered so much, literally and figuratively. And it rains so much there, of course, being a temperate rainforest, but the smell of the moss and the clear river, the waters and the ancient trees, there's no way to really describe it. Essential experiences? Watching a humpback whale breach just meters from your boat. Standing on the banks of a stream as spirit bears and black bears paw at a feed of salmon. Or even sipping wine or liqueur on the lodge deck as whales surface in the still harbors, bald eagles perching on dead branches above. Search for wolf paw prints in the beach sands of Campania Island across the water from Princess Royal Island. Or drop a line into a crystalline stream in pursuit of trout. Now, fly fishing has always been something that's fascinated me. If anyone has experience with that, let me know what it's like. There seems to be something so meditative about wading into the water. It must be extremely cold. And standing there and whipping the line about, hearing the sound of it, a little plop as it goes into the water, the whiz of the reel, and just standing there monitoring, watching the ripples, watching the way the river moves past your own feet. I imagine at some point you might become a part of nature yourself. Isn't that a stunning image on the Tiger Trail found across India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan? The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, Kipling's classic book of tales, including that of Mowgli, the young boy raised by wolves on the Pench National Park area. I think these lovely little hummingbirds are a delicate reminder. When you're planning your travel itinerary, I know you want to make the most of it. We all want to make the most of our time and our money. It only goes so far. But please take a moment to also stop and look at the little things. I guarantee you, if you're running from museum to museum, from site to site to site, you'll be overwhelmed. You won't remember half of it. But if you take a minute to look at the little things, like this tiny hummingbird in Ecuador, maybe it's one single painting in a museum full of masterpieces, or a tiny little shop with local food, as opposed to the Michelin-starred reviewed restaurants that you have pre-booked. It might be the small things that bring you the most joy. Now, Belgium. I always think of chocolates when I think of Belgium, but the country has 125 plus breweries, making well over 1,000 beers. It says here that beer is a shortcut to Belgium's soul. Are you Belgian? Can you tell me that? Do you identify more with the chocolate or the beer? Is it truly a shortcut to your soul? Cape Town. I think it's important when we travel to embrace both the wonderful modern and also what could be a difficult past. If we understand both, the heartache and the triumph, I think we understand ourselves and the world a little bit better. Now, there's nothing as stunning as these cities and these towns that are built directly on the edge of the water. They look as if they're almost going to topple into the sea at a moment's notice. But they have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. How wine came to Chile. Blame the missionaries, the book says. When Spanish conquistadores decided to have their way with Chile, it opened the door for missionaries to begin preaching the good word. In order to conduct mass, the missionaries needed wine, which prompted Diego Garcia de Caceres to plant the first vines in Santiago in 1554. By the 1800s, the vineyards had grown from supplying merely the local Sunday mass to exporting their product to Europe, and production peaked just before World War II. These days, the industry has been scaled back slightly, but the country is still well known for its top-quality Cabernet Sauvignons. In the early 1800s, the hill country's colonial settlers in Sri Lanka cleared the jungles and planted coffee trees, only to have the entire crop wiped out some 40 years later after a fungus infection spread across the countryside. Faced with a huge loss of revenue, a few brave planters, including James Taylor, heard about tea growing in similar conditions in India. Taylor embarked on a trip to Assam in northern India, returning with seeds for the tea bushes that now proliferate throughout the region. The Taylor family is credited with bringing tea to Ceylon, igniting one of Sri Lanka's main industries. On to everyone's favorite topic, travel and romance. We can always get poetic in the Lake District. If it's romance you want, try the English Lake District. Its fells, lakes, and woods unleashed the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings that started the Romantic movement. Visit today and see what emotions it kindles in you. The first rock climb. Samuel Taylor Coleridge wasn't just a brilliant poet and tortured soul, he was also England's first recreational rock climber. That's unexpected. On the 5th of August, 1802, he went out for a walk in the Lakeland Hills but ended up descending a series of ledges that grew ever steeper. Eventually, he had to drop down a 3-meter cliff onto a tiny sloping ledge before squeezing through a narrow cleft and onto safer ground. The route is today called Broadstand, a difficult graded rock climb. Somehow, Coleridge managed to survive it. His reaction? I lay in a state of almost prophetic trance and delight. Surviving will often do that to you. A poet and an outdoorsman. Wandering along the lakeshore, you look up. A lonely cloud floats along, its shadow passing from vale to hill. You look down again, and what do you know? Beneath the budding trees ahead is a host of golden daffodils. And yes, they are fluttering and dancing in the breeze. The Lake District National Park in northwest England. For the daffodils, the best time is in spring, probably April to May, though I suppose if it's a very, very cold spring, you might get them even as early or as late as early June. I feel like that's a place where you need to stay and wander for as long as you can. Take a few days just to hike. I'd spend a day or two just sitting here and looking at everything. Now that's quite a view. If you like poetry, it's a wonderful place to be as well. The real Wordsworth. People think of Wordsworth as serious, Victorian, and establishment, but by the time of his death at age 80, he was. But as a young man, he was a rebel. He failed his Cambridge exams on purpose, despite his family, walked to Italy without telling anyone, then got involved in some revolutionary politics in France. He had a secret French love child, and his own government spied on him and Coleridge because they were so reactionary. A generation later, Byron may have been mad, bad, and dangerous to know, but he was only following in the footsteps of William Wildchild. I love how we think now of poets and poetry as something old and stuffy that you're forced to learn in English class. But the reality is, these people knew the impact of words. They were revolutionaries and rebels in their own right. Far from the stuffy image we've conjured of them now. This is looking out over Keswick, the landscape that inspired the Romantic poetry, and with the lakes and these amber mountains, these deep green rolling fields, it's not hard to see why. The essential experiences in French Polynesia, swimming in clear, warm water bliss with dancing manta rays, watching the sun dip below the orange horizon to the strum of a ukulele, luxuriating on your own very private natural wood bungalow over the water while listening to the soft swish of the surf, paddling a kayak through turquoise waters to a deliciously deserted pink sand beach, or hearing the squawk of hundreds of seabirds on their forested nesting grounds, smiling at village children playing football on the dried grass local pitch, drinking French wine or fresh tropical fruit juice cocktail whenever you want. The best time of year, they say, to visit is April, May, October, November. But I don't think any of us would be picky about what month we went to paradise. Surfing on the reef, staying in thatched huts in Pearl Bay Resort on Tikihau, where the only hazard, they say, might be falling coconuts. Seeing tropical fish while you're snorkeling, getting more freckles. Romancing the Riviera, often referred to as the 3 scenic roads that run from Nice to Monaco at different altitudes. This corner of the French Riviera is famed for its stupendous beauty and highbrow history. The Monte Carlo Casino, how famous. Everything from James Bond to European royalty, celebrities from the golden age of Hollywood up until the present. The casino is a sumptuous building with gilded chandeliers, stuccoed ceilings, oak-paneled walls, and the rarefied atmosphere of unbridled wealth. Spending an evening here needn't cost the earth, however. Entry to the main gaming room costs just €10, and the minimum bet is 5. Jackets are compulsory for men after 8 p.m. As for women, the dressing up is impossible to overdo. Now that's worth it just for the experience, don't you think? Little did they know that a Hollywood star would one day marry Monaco's sovereign. One of the most enduring images of Alfred Hitchcock's classic film To Catch a Thief is of Grace Kelly speeding along the French Riviera in a blue cabriolet, an unflappable Carey Grant next to her in the passenger seat. Kelly, with her perfect blonde perm, candy pink twin set and scarf flowing in the breeze, looks every bit the poster girl of 1950s glamour. Grant and Kelly end up kissing on a viewpoint above Monaco at the end of the scene. And it was in Monaco that Kelly found herself her own Prince Charming, Prince Réunion of Monaco, whom she married in 1956 in what the media dubbed the wedding of the century. Carey Grant is such an interesting character. It's not even his real name. He had such a persona that he's famously quoted as saying that even he wishes he was Carey Grant. I think his real name was Arthur. Coconuts and spices on the coast of India. It's a pirate's life in Nassau, the Bahamas. Once a rum-soaked bolt hole for buccaneers, Nassau is now a getaway for lovers, where couples get romantic in the fragrant back gardens and labyrinthine wine cellars of an 18th century pirate's mansion known as the Grey Cliff Hotel. The essential experiences, they say, is to sip a mellow vanilla-inflected cognac from the hotel's bar that has some 9,000 bottles of cognac and port. And of course, gawk at the psychedelically colored fish along the reefs of New Providence. The hibiscus is in bloom, and you and your beloved are sitting with your feet kicked up on your private balcony high in the hills overlooking the cobblestoned old town of Nassau, with a glass of golden rum in hand. And you've got a pretty good idea of what it was like to be a gentleman pirate surveying his bounty in the mid-1700s. This is the Grey Cliff Hotel, built in 1740 by the fearsome pirate Captain John Howard Graysmith, who plundered Spanish galleons throughout the Caribbean with his schooner, the Grey Wolf. I love how these things are things that we'd maybe make up in our own stories, but people actually lived them. At some point, this man thought, yes, I'm going to go plunder Spanish galleons, and I'm going to give my ship the coolest name I can think of. Graysmith built the Georgian-style mansion atop a hill looking down over the gin-clear water, not just for aesthetic value, but so he could spot any incoming ships. Later, the house became a garrison for the U.S. Navy, Nassau's first inn, and a playpen for jazz-age Americans looking to party during the years of Prohibition. It's nice to know that the history of rum running is alive and well in the Bahamas. Of course, it would be remiss to talk about the Bahamas without mentioning the Pirates of the Caribbean. It says the Grey Cliffs builder John Howard Graysmith may not have been as glamorous as Johnny Depp, as Captain Jack Sparrow, but these fun Disney films will get you into that arg pirate spirit. You could crunch through Krakow in the winter. With the largest medieval square in Europe, I believe. Beautiful architecture. I love the blues and the oranges and the yellows of these colors coming together in this picture. And of course, you could always have some mulled wine and pierogies to help you pass the time after a long day of sightseeing. We'll read just a little bit from cities, and then I think we'll call it a day. Slovenia is Europe's smallest capital. They say it feels like a pleasant, self-contented town, but its petite size conceals a wealth of culture. You could be boating on Lake Bled, one of Slovenia's most popular tourist resorts. Above, dragons guard a bridge. The spires, domes, and rooftops of the compact city center are on the right. And of course, how can you talk about cities without talking about the Thames as it weaves its way through London? The boat race. The Thames is all things to all people, including being the setting for one of the world's most famous sporting contests. Each March or April, rowing eights from Oxford and Cambridge universities power upstream from Putney Bridge, as they've done since 1829 in the boat race. If you're walking on race day, don't expect to make it along the banks between Chiswick Bridge and Putney, as it's estimated that around 250,000 people line the river to watch the race. It's a 6.8 kilometer along the race course from Chiswick Bridge down to Putney Bridge. There's such a rich history in London. The layers and layers of culture and defense, invaders, religion, war. I love images like this that reflect so much of the city's history in just one simple photo. You have the river that's been flowing through this area since probably before recorded history. You have this sleek glass and steel and concrete, and these layers of architectural history behind. You can only imagine what layers there are beneath. History meets modernity. Tower Bridge, the London Eye, so many beautiful museums, including, I think probably the Victoria and Albert has to be a favorite. And I think we'll finish up today with a fresh take on the Big Apple. Who doesn't want a bite of the Big Apple? There's another incredible city with a river running through it, the Hudson River, which if you've forgotten, you just have to think about the miracle on the Hudson. The Hudson River flows for 500 kilometers through New York State from Lake Tier of the Clouds to the Atlantic Ocean, passing the Adirondacks, state capital Albany, and the Catskill Mountains. The Lenape called it the river that flows two ways. Today, it's named after British explorer Henry Hudson, who navigated it in 1609, trying to find the Pacific. He was a little far off, I think. The Hudson isn't the U.S.A.'s longest waterway, but it is one of the most important. Nearby, trade between Native Americans and settlers flourished. Influential families such as the Roosevelts, Rockefellers, and others laid roots. America's first art movement began, and writers such as Wharton and Irving set their tales here. Again, there's this wonderful architecture, this shining steel spire. Essential experiences: gaze up at the behemoth-like skyscrapers from a water-level perspective and feel really, really small. Refuel after your exertions at a proper NYC deli, double pastrami on rye. Now, a proper New Yorker, please in the comments explain to me the difference between a convenience store and a bodega. Is it just the charm? Is it just the New Yorkness of it that separates it? Let me know. Row on the lake in Central Park, a little bit cheesy, a little bit brilliant. That does sound a little bit cliche, but I think it's worth it sometimes when you're traveling to go and do the cliche things. Why not? You've seen it or imagined it or dreamt of it. Why not experience it? Who cares if you're a little bit cringe? Enjoy life. You can stroll along the elevated High Line and buy artisanal cakes from Union Squares. You can check out the traffic, the architecture, the food, the buildings, the people, the Empire State Building. Gargantuan. I think we'll stop here for now. If you enjoyed it and you'd like me to read a little bit more of the travels in this book or some other book, we could talk about Crete, we could talk about Tuscany, Boston. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read some more with you. And thank you so much for joining me as we discuss great escapes and enjoy the world at our leisure. It's been lovely having you along for this reading. Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.